Hi, I'm Chef Alan Tatro with Global Sugar Art, and today is the last segment of our Back to Basics with Buttercream. And today's segment is actually going to be advanced techniques in borders, and I'm going to go back a little bit and show you some things that we learned in the earlier segments just to refresh your memory and to make this more successful for you when you try some of these more advanced borders. We're going to do some side borders, we're going to do some bottom borders along the bottoms of cakes. We're going to do some simple flowers, and we'll put it all together showing you how the basic techniques that you've learned in the last couple of videos all come together for these advanced borders. Let's get started. In our last video, when I taught you how to make flowers, I purposely avoided teaching you how to make drop flowers. And drop flowers are exactly that. They're just dropped out of the bottom of the bag. They're very, very easy to make. This isn't an advanced technique, but these little flowers can be made up months in advance. You can store them in a cool, dry place out of the light. Just keep them dark so they don't fade. And you can use these on cupcakes, brownies, cookies, cakes. You can use them for anything. And they're a great little filler flower. The tips there's a wide variety of tips. You can get large tips. These you would not use a coupler. These are drop flower tips. And of course there's a whole variety of small drop flower tips that will fit right on the end of a pastry bag. So today I'm just going to show you two, because the technique to make all of the drop flowers is exactly the same. I have some pink buttercream in here, and it's tip number 225. And to make a drop flower, and these are some of the drop flowers right over here on my left, you're going to hold the bag perfectly straight up and down, perpendicular to the board. Turn your wrist to begin with, and when you put that tip down to the board and you start squeezing, you're going to turn your wrist. The important thing is to keep the bag straight up and down throughout that movement. If you start angling like this, then the flower won't come out right. So it's really important to keep that bag perfectly straight up and down and get as much turn as you can on your wrist. These really aren't hard. Once you get the knack of it, it goes pretty quick. So I'm going to squeeze, I'm going to turn, and then I'm going to let go of the pressure completely and then lift up. Let me do a couple more of these. I'm going to squeeze and turn at the same time and then lift up. If you don't let go, if you don't stop squeezing, what's going to happen is this is going to build up, and you're going to get a little center that comes up, almost like a little star that comes up in the center. If you do stop squeezing and you stop putting that pressure on the bag, it'll leave almost a little hole in the middle. And you want that hole there because you're going to fill that with another color icing so that you have a little center to your flower. So it's just a twist of the wrist, stop the pressure, and lift it straight up. Now, these aren't a flower that you can pipe easily on a cake. The best thing to do with these is to make them out of royal icing and pipe them on a parchment paper, and then let them sit for several hours or overnight, and they'll dry and they'll pop right off the paper. This is a tip, let's see, just wanted to make sure I get the right tip. This is a 2D, and this makes a much larger flower. Same thing, I'm going to start way over here, and I'm going to turn, stop the pressure, and lift up. And you'll see how the center of these flowers is sort of hollow, which is exactly what I want. You'll have good ones and bad ones and some that are in between. I keep them all because you never know when you can use one to fill in. Just keep the bag straight up and down. After you've made your flowers, you can use like a tube 3 or tube 4 and another color icing, and you can just fill in the centers. That's the one that I didn't let go so I could show you. And then the larger flowers, you're just going to make a larger center. Just hold the tip in there and let it build up more. And those are very simple drop flowers. And like I said, there's probably 10 or 12 or more different tips that will make different styles of flowers with less petals or more petals, and different sizes. So they're easy to work with, they can be made ahead, and they're a great filler flower, and we're going to be using them today on one of the borders. So next we're going to get into some more complicated shell borders. Okay. The first border that I want to do is an elongated reverse shell. Now, in one of the beginning videos, I showed you how to do a reverse shell, and that was just by going to the right and to the left. If you go back to one of the first Buttercream videos, I showed you how to make a simple reverse shell. This border I'm going to do now is more elongated, and it's great for the top edge of a cake where one shell will be on top of the cake and one comes down the side. And it's just making a right and then a left, and a right and a left. Now, in today's segment, I'm not going to go through a lot of technique on how to pipe a shell, because we've done that in the last couple of videos. So today I'm just showing you variations. So again, this is a great border to put on the top edge of a cake, where the top shell will be on top of the cake, and then this one would go over the edge of the cake. And if you want, you can even pipe a third set of shells right in the middle. And of course, that row would go right along the very top edge of your cake. So those are just some variations. Okay, some of the other shell borders that we're going to make are seen over here on my left. We're first going to do this basic shell border, and that's done. That was done in I think the first or the second video in the basics. I'm just going to pipe a number 22 or number 20 shell, and you would pipe this all around the edge of your cake, either on the top or the bottom, it doesn't matter. And then I'm going to use either the same color or an accent color with a number 3 tip. And I'm basically going to drop a string right around the edge of the shell. Now, because this isn't a real drop string on the side of a cake, I can do this with buttercream, and I don't have to worry about it breaking. So I don't need to paddle my icing and use a royal icing or a boiled icing for a nice drop string. You can just do this with regular buttercream. Another nice border is a tip 199 puff border. So again, this is tip 199, and I'm just going to make some nice big puffs. They're just a shell, but I'm just letting it build up a little bit. And the border that I'm doing is this top one. And then I'm going to use the very smallest petal tip that Wilton makes. It's a 101S. And I'm going to start from the back of the shell, go right over the top, and end up on this side of it. And I'm just going to use a slight back and forth motion, sort of just a little squiggle like that. And that's all I'm doing. I'll do that again so you can. It doesn't have to be really, really even. It just has to be straight across the top. So start on the back. I'm going to come right down to the front. There. And then to finish that up, you can either use a pink or a white, doesn't really matter. And I'm going to use about a number 13 or 14. And I'm going to drop a little string using a star tip along the bottom. And there you have a nice side border. Again, you can do this tone on tone where it's all the same color, or you can do with accent tones. This is a great way to pull colors from the top of your cake if you have a floral display and you want to bring some of those accent colors to the bottom border. This is a really nice way to do it. Let's see. And then the last one we're going to do is a triple shell. And I'm going to use about a number 17 or 18 on this border. To begin with, you would decide if you're going to do this on the top of the cake or along the bottom, and you're just going to squirt out just a single strand of shell. Now notice I kept it just off the board or off the cake so that I could get it nice and straight. You're going to pipe a series of shells, very small shells, along one side. And then on the other side of it, you're going to match those shells. So it's important that they all line up. That way they're all the same size. So now I have 2 rows of shells. Now in between that row, I'm going to build my 3rd layer. These are all basic techniques, and you're just adding them together to create a new kind of border. So that is a really nice border to do on the top edge of a cake. It's a great border for like the bottom of a tiered cake when you want a heavier border. So those are some of the shell borders that are just accented and made a little bit different, embellished a little bit. So we're going to move on from here to Lily of the Valley. I'll be right back with that. Okay, we're back and we're going to move on to the Lily of the Valley border. And I'm going to do that on white on this blue border so that you can really see how to do this cake. This is a border that looks great when it's done white on white or pink on pink or tone on tone. If you try to do this as a white border on a yellow cake or a pink cake or whatever color you want, it looks good. But it always looks better if it's the same color as the icing on the back. It's just one of those borders that just looks better all in one color. So to start that, on the side of the cake, you're just going to make a simple little up and down pattern. It can be a little irregular. It doesn't have to be perfect. The trick here is to remember that all the Lily of the Valley petals have to be pointing in the same direction. So you don't want to put one going out this way and then one going out this way. They all want to be flowing in the same direction. The other trick is think of top down and bottom up. So here's the top of the hump. So from here I'm going to come down. Let's take that out of there. We're going to come down with a spray for the Lily of the Valley. The same here. I'm going to come down and down again. And if you were doing the bottom, you're going to be going up. So try to keep the same flow, the same curve. So now I have from the top down and from the bottom going up, and they're all going in the same direction. From here I'm going to switch to a tube 80. You can use 79, 80, or 81. It's a little half moon tip. It's used for chrysanthemums, and it works great for Lily of the Valley as well. I'm going to start on the inside. I'm just going to touch it to the cake and pull straight up, and then let go, and it'll break off. And I'll often go on both sides of my little stem This is a very, very easy border to make. Sort of an old-fashioned lily of the valley border, but it's still nice. And there's the flowers on your border. And then I'm going to go back to my round tip, and I'm going to make some little vines. And to do the vines, you're just going to touch the flower, the icing down, and then just go in a little circular motion and pull away. And again, you want them going in the direction that all your sprays of flowers are going. You don't have to put a lot of them in, just a few of them will accent it. And that's a very simple lily of the valley border. Now this very last border, I'm actually not going to show you because there's really very little to show. I did show you how to make the drop flowers. When those are dried, you can pop them right off your board, and then you can use them to make a border like this. And all I did on the side of my cake is I dropped a string, or I marked the side of the cake, and I piped a little crescent border with a number 16 tip. And while the icing was still soft, I took each one of these little drop flowers and I just placed them on there, trying to keep them thin at the top and then making them wider at the bottom, so you keep that natural shape going. But this is a very, very simple little border. You don't have to worry about your piping underneath because you're only using the icing as glue. That's it. And to give a little dimension out of the side of the cake. But that's a great little border to do on a cake. That looks great on a little girl's cake, and they love all the little flowers. So when we come back, we're going to get into some of the side borders where we're using some of the crescent borders and ribbon borders that we learned in a previous lesson, and today we're going to add the string work to them. We'll be right back. Okay, I'm going to show you now how to make two different crown borders, and one of them is a large crown border with an overlapping string work, and the second one is a smaller crown border with a drop string work. Now the large borders like this are great for the top of a bottom tier of a cake, or even the crown border is often seen on the top tier of a wedding cake. It all depends on what size tip you use, and it should be proportional to the size of the cake. So I'm going to start by showing you a large border that's great for a bottom cake. And I'm using a tip 4B, which is one of the large tips that you have to put in the bag without a coupler. And I'm going to be doing a shell, I'm going to be doing a row of them, and I'm going to come down to a point. So I'm going to let that build up and come down to a point. And then just make a nice even row of these. There. And then to do the string work on these, I'm using some boiled icing, or you can use a royal icing. Make sure that you paddle the icing first to get all the air bubbles out of it, and then put it in a bag with a number 3 tip. I'm using a number 3 because this is a larger border and it can stand a larger string. I'm going to start on the very outside, and I'm going to drop this way down to the bottom of the border, and I'm going to go all the way right up to the middle, right in between them. And I'm going to drop a second one, and this one will be a little bit above the first one. Now notice I'm not doing all 4 strings on each shell and then moving to the next shell. I'm doing one row and then the next row, and that way they'll fall correctly. And one more border. And you can top it with one last one. So I'm doing 4 strings on this. And each time I'm going right back to the same point in between each shell so that they all line up. And that is the basic border. And then if I wanted to embellish that a little bit, I'm going to go about halfway up. I'm going to anchor my icing, and I'm going to drop a string and come right up in between. Now you can make these together tight as I did this border, or if you want to separate them a little bit and leave about a ½ an inch of room in between each shell and make them a little longer, you can see the effect that just the spacing makes on the cake. I prefer more space, especially on a large bottom tier. But if you have a smaller cake, like the top of a cake, you'll want to keep them together more. So that's the basic crown border with the overlapping string. The next border that I want to show you is the smaller crown border with the drop string. And for this one, we're going to move to a tip 199. And we're going to do a very similar piping the shells vertically. Try to get them all the same distance apart and the same size. And we're going to use the, where'd my string go again? I'm not sure if I have enough in this bag to continue. I may have to stop and refill. So I'm going to start at the bottom of one, drop a string, and I'm going over 2 shells. Same thing, 2 shells. You're going to do 1 single string all the way across. Now you can do your second border. Start at the very first shell again, and again go to that second shell. This way you have the interlocking string. Whoops. When that happens, when you get a little air bubble, the best thing to use is a little needle tool or a cake tester, and you can see that you can lift that right off. So mistakes can be repaired. I got my 2 there. There. And you can finish these. I like to use a little star sometime to finish these. And just put a little star right where all your strings connected. And there you have the crown border with the drop strings. And again, the size of the shells and the placement, the spacing, and how far you drop the string are all going to change the look on the cake. So experiment with different spacing and different depths, making the strings drop lower or higher. You can also do a triple string on these, or a single string, or the double like I did. Basically, you're taking the basic techniques of string work and shells, and you're putting them together in multitudes of patterns to create a new border. I'm going to get a new board, and we're going to come back and we're going to do some of the garland borders with string work. I'll be right back. Okay, we're back and we're going to do some of the garland borders. And the first border that I'm going to do is the crescent border with the string work, and then we'll go on to the crescent and the ribbon together. So I've already dropped my lines so that I know my spacing. It's very helpful when you're doing a cake, and you can see my little marks on here. I'm not trying to cheat. To line up your spacing on your cake, so you know exactly how far apart each decoration is going to be. And then when you drop your string, you can sort of eyeball it. And if you're really new to this, you can actually put a little dot at the bottom of where the string should be, so that you drop it to the same point all the way around. So there are tricks in learning to be very accurate. I'm going to use a tube 16, and I'm going to do a basic crescent border, sort of an E motion. And just to show you, you can go in either direction. You can either go clockwise or you can go counterclockwise. However you feel is easier, or the effect that you want to get. I kind of like going the counterclockwise. And I'll do one the other way again. They both have a different look. All right, so once you've created your crescent border, then it's time to add your string work. And I'm going to use a number 2 tip. And I'm going to drop the first string along the bottom first. So anchor that string, come straight out, and then anchor it at the top. Make sure you release the icing and you pull back out before trying again. Don't just touch it and go and touch and go. If you do that, if one string breaks off of your border, it brings all the rest of them with it. And all of a sudden you see a domino effect and you watch all your string work drop. So it's important to pull out the string and anchor it into the icing, and then pull out another one. And then I'm going to do a second row. So I'm going to start exactly where I started the first string. Make sure to anchor on both sides. Okay. And now we're going to drop one on the inside. And I'm going right to the top of the decoration with that, the top of each garland. And now I want to do one on the outside. So I'm going to sort of mark. I know about where I want these. And you can even put a little mark on your cake, so they're all nice and even. I know I have a nice straight row of dots. There, and then you get that nice bottom string underneath there. And you can finish these off as usual with a couple little loops. You can put a little star there. You can put a little drop flower. Even a little white drop flower is nice on these. And that is the crescent border with string. The next border is very, very similar. I made these a little bit wider. Instead of 2.5 inches, I went almost 3 inches with these. And I'm going to start with a tip, if I can reach it, 104. Remember on the ribbon border that the large end of the tip is up and the small end is down, and point it outward a little bit. And right along the string, I'm going to pipe a little ribbon border. I'm going to go back to my tube 16. Now on the inside, you can do the same sort of E motion that you did in the crescent border, or you can just do a back and forth crescent, where you just start going in a little back and forth motion. And then you lighten up as you get to the top. Start light, build a little wider, and then back up. Okay. String work is identical to the last border. Start at the end. You're going to do the bottom string. And then the second string. And then you can do another string down here if you'd like. And you can do one in the middle as well. And just like the last border, you can finish that with some little drop strings or flowers, anything you want, or you can just leave it as is. So those are two basic garlands that you can do on the side of the cake. If you can't do the string work and you find that's too difficult at this point, you can still do the garlands and leave those on the cake, and don't do the string work. A really good tip with string work is always try to do the string work the color of your cake and the color of your decoration. Because string work by nature is a little off-center, sometimes one side's a little higher than the other, it's hard to get string work perfect. If you can do it perfect, then you could put bright red string work on a white cake and it will look beautiful. But if you can't do it perfect, it will always look sort of off-kilter. So in order for this to really look good and get the best eye appeal to the cake, if you're going to have a white cake, do your decorations in white and do your string work in white. If you're going to ice your cake in yellow, do your decorations in yellow and do your string work in yellow, and you're going to get the most bang for the buck. You're going to get the best looking cake as a beginner or an intermediate decorator. When your skills are really good, then you can go on and use colored string work on top of your borders. In the meantime, try to stay tone on tone and you'll find a lot more success. When I come back, we're going to finish with the last couple of borders. We'll be right back. Okay, one of the last side borders that I want to teach you how to do is what we call the bridal veil border. And I taught you basic lattice work when we did the string theory, and we did some lattice work on top of the cake, both with a star tip and then we did it with a round tip. So this is basically the same lattice work except done on a side border. I dropped 3 strings to mark my pattern. And I'm going to start by doing an up and down zigzag, a crescent border using an up and down motion, not the E motion. And I'm using a tube 16. And I'm going to keep that nice and flat against the cake. Remember to thin it down as you get to the top of the border. Just relax the pressure a little bit so you don't get these big thick joins where the garlands join together. Now normally I would go all the way around my cake and I would let that border dry for maybe 5 minutes, depending on the type of icing you're doing. I don't want it to become hard. I just don't want it to be a real sticky icing. I want it just to be so that I could touch the icing and it doesn't stick to my finger. I'm going to go back and I'm going to do the same thing on top, but I'm going to use a smaller tip. And I'm going to switch to a 14. So I'm building up my border is what I'm doing. Start at the top, go in a zigzag motion, right on top of the other one. Okay. And then the last thing I'm going to do after I let that dry for maybe 5 minutes, is I'm going to drop sort of like a string, except with the star tip. Make sure you anchor it. There are many different variations of this border, and this is just basically building up those shells so that they come away from the side of the cake. I'm going to switch to a number 2 string. Now I have to imagine that the top of my cake is right along the top of this border. I'm going to start right in the middle, and I'm going to come out, and I'm just going to touch that string to the edge. I'm going to go try to keep it nice and even. And after you've done one side, you turn and you go the other direction. Make sure that you always anchor your string at the top and at the bottom. And that gives you the lattice look on the inside. Oh, let's grab the paper towel here. And to finish that off, I'm going to use a very small 13 or 14 tip. Along the top border, I would put a little shell. This would be right up against the side of the cake. And on the bottom border, I would drop a string. And that would just hide the end of those strings that I just put on. And that gives you that lattice effect. We'll do one more. So start in the middle and come over at an angle. And then you're going to go in the other direction. Oops. These look really nice if you can use a small tip. This is a tip 2, and these look okay. I will often go down and use tip number 1 on these, and you get a much finer lattice, just a more elegant look on a cake. Drop your string, and then you can cover the tops with a little bit of a shell border. And that is the bridal veil border. The last border I want to teach you is called a Grecian column border, and that's actually done on the side of a cake. It doesn't work well on a board like this, like a practice board. So I'm going to bring a cake over, and I'm going to show you how to use a tilting turntable, which makes string work much easier to do, and how to do this Grecian border. We'll be right back. One of my favorite borders to use on the bottom of a large tiered cake is this Grecian border. When you're making a tiered cake, think about the size of the tips you're using and the size of the decoration that you want to pipe. Try to keep your heavier, larger borders at the bottom of the cake and use the larger tips toward the bottom. And then as you graduate up the cake, go to smaller, lighter, airier borders and smaller tips, and everything will be in proportion. This is a great border. You can use this on just a single tiered cake like this, or you can use it at the bottom of a large cake. It's an easy border to do. Before I show you this border, I wanted to show you a tilting turntable and how this can make your life easier for piping. The top comes off, and there's a knob here in the middle that turns, and there are different settings here on the side. And what happens is, as you turn that, the turntable tilts more. So depending on how much you turn it, will control the angle of the tilt. What this allows me to do is I can turn this, and now the part of the cake facing me is tilting backwards. And when I'm piping string work, I can see more clearly, and the string work immediately falls and lands on the cake, and then it sticks to the cake. Sometimes when your cake is perfectly straight up and down and perpendicular to the board, the string work may come out a little bit, and it sort of flies in the wind. And all of a sudden you'll see the string work drop just because of the weight of the string pulling itself off. If it attaches to the cake, it'll stay right in place. So the tilting turntable is a really nice tool to have when you're doing any sort of side decorations or string work. And I like it because you can really control how much of a tilt you get. Because it has a non-stick surface, it'll stick right to the board will stay right on there, and you don't have to worry about it falling off. So to do this border, I've made some little marks along the top about 3 inches apart. I'm using icing, and I'm going to put these about, this is a tube 4B. I'm going to start by a lot of pressure on the bottom and then releasing the pressure and coming straight up to make a column. And then I'm going to come straight up. And I'm stopping just as I get to the top. And we'll do one more. Just think of it as a really long shell. And then I'm going to pipe a little bit of string work in between each one of these. And I'm going to do a triple string. And I'm just going to turn this so that the angle is correct. And I'm going to drop 3 strings. I'm going from the top of the pillar to the top of the pillar. With a heavy border like this on the bottom, you could easily go to a tube 3 or 4 for the string work, and it would look fine. You'll notice I'm often just cleaning the end of the tip. When you're doing string work, it's really important to keep the end really clean. Oops. Okay, so we have the string work done. Now I'm going to use a tube 16, and I'm going to pipe a little bit of a shell all the way around the outside and then right up against the cake. Again, I'm not teaching you anything new. These are all basic techniques that you've done in the last classes. In my last videos. It's just that you're putting them together in a different order. And that takes care of the bottom border. And now I'm going to straighten this up. And if you remember that triple shell that we did, I'm going to do this on the top, but I'm not going to lay down that first line. I'm going to show you a different way to do the triple. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to do one on the side. I'm doing a small shell on the side. And then I'm going to do one right on the top of the cake. Remember to keep your shells lined up and all the same size. And then I'm going to pipe in between those, in the middle, I'm going to pipe the third row. And that is the triple border on top. And it looks just different than a regular shell border. It has more motion to it. I kind of like it. To finish this off, I'm just going to quickly make a 101 rose. And my tip has got a little bit of a plug in it. And that's why I keep a little needle tool handy. I'm just making a very small rose. Again, I covered this in the flower video, but I also have a video out just on making roses. So we're going to do a very tiny rose. I'm going to put a couple little spots of frosting in there just so that it sticks. I'm using a small pair of scissors to take this off so I can fit it right in. And we'll do one more. And then you can finish that off with a little bit of a green leaf. And that is the Grecian border. One last quick thing that I wanted to show you. When you're piping bottom borders, when we did a shell earlier, there's a couple easy things that you can do other than the little ribbon or the string. And I just wanted to show you those really quick. If you're piping a bottom border, just a regular shell, and you want to embellish that a little bit, a green leaf is an easy way. You can either use green or you can use white, whatever color you're using on the board. You can just use a leaf tip, and you can go right around the bottom of the border and just add a little accent. This is another great way to add a little accent of color without all the work of using the little 101S and piping the little ribbons. It just adds a little bit more dimension to the cake. I hope you've enjoyed this series on buttercream decorating. Probably in a couple of weeks, we're going to be launching a make your own wedding cake using buttercream techniques. And I'm going to divide the cake so that we can do one side of the cake for very beginners and very basic decorating, and the other side of the cake will just be a little bit more advanced techniques, a little bit more embellished. So we'll have that video coming out probably later this fall. Thank you for watching, and again, you can purchase everything that I used today at globalsugarart.com. Have a great day.